Hello again, everyone. So I'm finally getting around to doing some tests of some fountain pen paper. So today I'm going to be testing the paper that comes in this little sample booklet of different papers by Kamiterior writing. I think that's how you say it. And this is the Kamiterior for fountain pens. So they have a few different little booklets like this, and I'll put a link to where I got mine down below. They have a few different little booklets like this. Some are for different types of writing instruments. This one is for fountain pens. So what I've already done, so there's 5 different papers in here, and they told you what papers they were in Japanese, but I went and found out which paper is in here. So we have OK Fool's Foolscap paper, Bank paper, Tomoe River paper, Spika Bond paper, and Eastleigh COC paper. So I have not looked into how broadly available all of these different papers are. And as far as the Tomoe River paper is concerned, I'm pretty sure that this is the old Tomoe River paper. So what I'm going to be doing my comparisons on today, I think, is all old Tomoe River paper. So I'm going to put this little booklet aside, but this is what it looks like. It's separated out into the 5 different kinds of papers in there. And then on this larger sheet of paper here, I've written out the pens that I'm going to be testing on all of these different papers. And this paper is this paper here from Naname Cafe Note, the people who make the Naname Cafe Notes. And this is the original Tomoe River paper, I'm pretty sure. So, and I'll put a link to this paper as well. So here I already have written out in all of these pens what the pens are and what the inks are. And I'll tell you why I chose these. So I wanted to choose a variety of nib widths. So I went from very large with this music nib, from platinum all the way down to extra fine. And then I also included the FA nib, which is a flexible nib from Pilot, just so that we could get that in the comparison. I already labeled each of these pieces of paper with what paper they are with this pen, which is this Narwhal Porpita Navy pen, but I changed the nib out on it because I'm not a big fan of the Narwhal nibs. So I swapped out the nib for this Esterbrook Extra Fine. This Extra Fine is actually not as fine as the Pilot Custom 92 fine that I have here. So this is the finest pen or finest nib that I am using, and I'll go through these here in a second. But I realized that I probably did not have something that's true extra fine anywhere. So this is what I did, and I didn't want to go down to my needlepoint nib because I did not want to include any custom grinds here. Although the music nib and the FA nib are a little bit unusual, I suppose you could call them unusual, they are available off the shelf and they are not custom grinds. So I wanted to test that because those are going to be the more accessible nibs. So this particular pen also has the same fountain pen ink that the FA nib has on it or in it. This is the Diamine Cherry Sunburst, and I actually had to double check to make sure that this truly was the same ink because they looked so different in the 2 different pens, but they are indeed the same ink. I double checked. And this will give you sort of a sense of how different the same inks can also look on the same paper. So like I said, I've already written with this one, so I'm not going to be writing with this one again. I wrote the names of the papers here and did a little squiggly next to it with some scribbles that gets more of a saturated ink. Here I wrote in both just regular block lettering and cursive, and I'm actually just going to write I'm going to just say hello there in cursive and in block lettering for each of these pens, and then do the squiggles and the more saturated ink swatch there. So that's what I'm going to do for all of them, mostly because the paper is not that big and I don't have a lot of room for more than that with the amount of pens that I'm testing. I went with 6 pens, although technically if you go with the title page as well, it's 7. And I'm actually going to go with these in reverse order from what I've written here so that you can see the FA nib next to the Esterbrook Extra Fine, which I've already written on here. So I'll go real quickly through the list of pens that I'm going to be testing. So like I said, this is the one I already wrote with. This is the Narwhal pen with the Esterbrook Extra Fine nib with Diamine Cherry Sunburst. Then I'm going to be writing with the Pilot Custom 912 with an FA nib, which is a flexible nib. And that has that same ink in there. And then I'm going to be doing this pen, which is a Pilot Custom 92. I haven't shown this one on the channel yet, I don't think. It was one of my finest nibs, so that's why I chose it here. It has a fine nib and it has Sailor ink in it. And then I'm going to be using this pen, which is the TWSBI Diamond 580 ALR Prussian Blue with a fine nib with Organic Studios Aldous Huxley, which I believe is the only super sheener that I have in here. And I actually have not, I also have not included any shimmer inks in this selection. So this next one is the Pilot Custom 823 Amber with a medium nib, and I have since replaced the ink in this with Mont Blanc Petrol Blue, which is actually a very beautiful blue, and it's a really nice shader in this pen. And so that's going up in size to the medium nib. And then I'm going to be doing this Pelikan M800 brown stripe with a bold nib. This is actually, it's unusual for Pelikan. It is a little bit less broad than some of the other broad nibs that I've seen, but I think this will still give us the progression from fine to broad. Although I guess the FA nib, it's sort of a fine flexible nib, so you're going to get more variation on that. And then this one is a Ranga pen that is, so Ranga is a pen company out of India, and this is a demo version, and it has the platinum music nib on it. So I recently did a video where I made a Franken pen by putting this platinum music nib onto a Karas Customs Vertex pen, and I have since swapped it from that pen to this pen because I was getting some pooling in the cap of the other, and I think I figured it out that the cap on the Vertex was actually sitting, the nib, well, this is also not a pull cap, which is an advantage, but I think the tip of the nib was actually sitting on the tip of the cap here, and so that's what was causing the pooling of ink in the cap. This one does not have that problem because there's a little more space. This is a Ranga pen that also takes a Bach nib unit. So this is a Bach nib unit with a platinum music nib. The nib unit that sort of converts one to the other was from Flexible Nib Factory. So I'm going to put a link down below to the video where I made that Franken pen, but just know that I've since swapped it to this pen. And I also like that this is a demo, so I can see the ink really well. And it's a screw cap instead of a pull cap like the Vertex was. And I feel like that's a little bit better for a dropper fill because I think every time you pull the cap off of a pull cap, you kind of get a little bit of pull on the ink. You might get the same with a screw cap, but it's less prominent, I think. All right, well, that was more detail than you probably needed on that music nib, but I just kind of wanted to explain that since I had done a video on that recently. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to get this sheet out of the way so that I can pull these into the frame here. I'm going to go from this on up here. That's the order in which they come in the little booklet. I'll bring this out again at the end, and we'll kind of take a look at some of the qualities of the different paper compared to this. I realize that we also have another Tomoe River paper here, so you're going to have some duplication, but I did want to write all of these out on a piece of paper that was big enough to accommodate that. So like I said, I'm going to go from the narrower to broader, although now I'm going to include the flexible nib. I have a little paper towel here because I am actually going to put the paper towel up to where I'm going to be doing the sample so that I don't get skin oils on the paper, because I don't want to taint the later writing samples with oils from my hand. So this is just what I had handy, so that's what I'm going to be using today. Okay, so let's go to the first one. And I think what would probably be easiest is to do each pen on each paper and then lay them out and compare them for you. So for now, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Let's go ahead and move this paper up so that you can see what I'm writing. Get these pens out of the way a little bit. So the first pen here is the Pilot Custom FA on a 912. So like I said, I'm just going to write hello there in both block lettering and cursive. And this I'm also going to do the squiggles on. All right. I'm going to keep those in the same order so I can do that on each sheet of paper. So I do want to kind of take stock of how much room I have here. I think I'm doing okay because I do have 6 pens. And if I have a little extra room on the bottom, that's better than having not enough room. So this is the Pilot Custom 92 with a fine nib. And maybe I can get a little bit more shading there. And this pen, or this paper, this particular paper is the OK Fool's Cap paper. And it actually feels quite nice to write on. I am writing with each of these papers directly onto this writing surface, which is a leather desk pad from Galen Leather. So I want to do them all in the same circumstance so that we can get the same effect here. So this is the TWSBI Diamond with a fine nib. And this is actually a pretty fine TWSBI. They're not always this fine. It really varies between nibs. I mean, you may get some that are really, really fine and some that are not so fine. That's just the nature of nibs. They do vary. Okay, and then this is the Pilot Custom 823 with a medium nib. Move that up a little bit so that you can see. Okay, and I only have 2 pens left and I have quite a bit of room, so I will go ahead and allow myself to write a little bit bigger here. Oh, and this has Kobe number 57 hydrangea in it. And I don't think I went through the ink names for the last ones. This one's Lennon Toolbar Wenshan Puchong tea. And that's what those two are. So we do have some space down at the bottom. I may end up doing some other samples later, but that's the first one. I'm going to go ahead and put that off to the side. And then I'm going to move to the bank paper. Bank paper, I think, is fairly readily available, but I have not tried to find it. Okay, I can already tell that this paper is not as smooth as the last one, and it also feels like it absorbs the ink a little bit more than the last paper. The first one, the OK Fool, seemed fairly smooth. Yeah, this has a little bit of tooth to it. And actually with this pen, I just heard a little bit of squeaking on the paper. All right. So that's the bank paper, and let's go on to the next one, and then I'll do a sort of an overview at the end. So this is the very classic Tomoe River. Always a nice choice. Definitely very smooth and lovely. Oh, that's interesting. I'm seeing the bank paper right now dry, and the purple ink in that last pen is really doing some interesting things. Here, I'll pull that out just real quick. So it definitely seems to be changing color quite a bit compared to the OK Fool's paper. And that's one of the fun things about different papers, is sometimes you can get some really different color out of the same ink. Oops, smeared that a little bit. Yeah, I have not tried, I am not doing smear tests on here, but I could towards the end, because I do have a little bit more space down at the end of each of these papers. And to mention, I do have the back piston unscrewed a little bit to allow ink to flow in this Pilot 823. All right, so that's the Tomoe River. Then we have Spika Bond. And at the end too, I will talk about sort of the difference in thicknesses in the paper and that sort of thing that I'm observing. Obviously, the Tomoe River paper is very thin. Oops, I should get more of a variation there. Wasn't really trying. And this feels a little bit, it has a little bit of tooth to it, certainly compared to the Tomoe River. Yeah, I can really feel the tooth with this next one here. Oops, I need to move that up without touching it too much, and I don't want to smear anything. Yeah, it seems like the more I go up in size, the more the tooth is prevalent. And you probably can hear that. How toothy that sounds. It's not as bad with this medium. But this is the first paper that I've really felt like it had more of a tooth. The OK Fools paper had a little bit of a tooth, but this is definitely... actually, I think the bank paper had just a little bit more tooth than the OK Fools paper. Yeah, and there's some little, what I call holidays there in the paper where the ink is not making it to some of the paper. Oh, and it feels quite awful on this music nib. And it almost feels like the paper is kind of resisting the ink with this more thick application of ink. Okay, I'm gonna put that off to the side. This is the last one. This is the Eastleigh paper. Yeah, and given our time, I'm probably not gonna do a smear test. I'll just do it with these here. Oops, did cursive first. This one has a little bit of a tooth too. And this is the only one that's a little off-white. Yeah, if you're looking for a smooth paper, this is not the one either. Although it's not, I mean, it's not horrible. I'd say the bank paper was probably the worst. Or I'm sorry, the Spika Bond was probably the worst for toothiness. This is pretty toothy too, but I feel like it's still smoother to write on. And actually the medium nib feels quite nice. The finer nibs definitely did not feel as good on this paper. Again, cursive first, because I'm trying to hurry up and finish, I think. Oh, and we're definitely getting some bleed on that prior ink there. Okay, so that was the last paper. I'm actually going to put them in the order in which they came again. Let's zoom out a little bit. See how much I have to zoom out so that you can see all of them. Okay, and this one's still drying a little bit, but it should dry by the time I end this video. Yeah, I'd say as far as color goes, the bank paper definitely has the most different look to it. Let's see. There we go. We can get all of them in the frame, and I will bring them up to the camera so that you can see more detail, because these are probably pretty small to you. And then looking next to this other Tomoe River paper, I think that this is pretty much the same paper. So we're going to get the same effects here. I did have a little accident where I smudged that one, but that was right away after I wrote. So I'm not sure that's going to be any more smudgy necessarily. So let me take a look here. So yeah, so let's just use this in place of this to compare. So let's see. So I would say, okay, so we're getting a little bit of bleed on the bigger size nibs here. I would say you notice it starting at the medium for the Spika bond. Although, yeah, there's still a little bit of bleed up here, but not as much as medium on down here. Yeah, that's sort of interesting. And this one definitely had a tooth to it. Let's see. Oh, we're also getting a little bit of bleed also on the Eastleigh paper that I think also kind of starts in the same place, medium nib and above. So I probably wouldn't write with either a really wet ink or something above, medium and above on the Eastleigh paper. I'm not seeing any bleed on the others. I would say, okay, Fools, there's maybe just a hint, but only in the music nib. But it's barely noticeable. An average person might not notice if they're looking at it. As far as color goes, probably the brightest color showed up in the Tomoe River paper and the Eastleigh paper. But again, with the Eastleigh paper, you've got that little bit of bleed when your nib is broader. As far as, I would say that these two probably ended up being the lightest, the bank paper and the Spika bond, as far as showing color and saturation. Although it does vary a little bit by ink, but I definitely think that the broader nibs here show up a little lighter. And with this one, especially this one, the bank paper, the Kobe ink showed up way more blue than any of the other samples. Color tone is fairly consistent. I would say of these, you know, obviously Tomoe River, always a favorite. Things show up very brightly on it. I would say after the Tomoe River paper would be Okay Fools, as far as order of preference for me, because you're getting the most accurate color representation. The Okay Fools actually shows sheen really nicely. Actually, let me, oh, I lost my camera there. It shows sheen really nicely on this particular one here. That's the Aldous Huxley. Let me see, can you even see that? Yeah, you can see it a little bit. It shows the sheen, I think, even better than the Tomoe River paper, which is kind of interesting. So of these, I would say maybe, you know, I've discovered a new paper in in the Okay Fools paper. The sheening does not show up very well on Spika Bond or Eastleigh. You can still see it on the bank paper, but it's almost completely invisible on the Eastleigh and the Spika Bond. I would say that these two are, I wouldn't even bother with these two for fountain pens, quite frankly, because of the bleed issue, and that you can't see sheen very well. So these two would be at the bottom of my list. I don't know which order they would be in. This one is number 2 after Tomoe River, which, you know, the Tomoe River paper is not going to be made the same way it was made before. So, you know, this one might be a good alternative out of these papers. It was fairly smooth to write on. I think the colors show up really nicely. And I would say after that, it's probably the bank paper. But the bank paper did have a little bit of a texture to it. But there doesn't seem to be bleeding, and it also seems to show the sheen fairly nicely. All right, so those are my initial impressions of this paper. This is actually really useful to me to see all these next to each other. So order of preference, Tomoe River, OK Fools, bank paper, top 3. These two are kind of paired at the bottom, the Spika Bond and the Eastleigh paper. So there you go. That's it. That's all I had for you today. I don't think I have time to really do the smear tests. I am going to be, which is a factor. So, you know, maybe I'll do a separate video or maybe an extension of this video where I do those tests. I am going to be testing the larger pad of the variety of papers that I also have, but that's going to be a separate video. And given the length of time that this took, I'm wondering if I should do the writing samples beforehand. I might end up doing that. And then I can do sort of like a smear test on camera or something like that. So I think that's all I had for you today. Feel free to subscribe to keep track of future videos on my channel. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. I hope this was useful to you. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask below and I'll get to them as soon as I can. But in the meantime, have a great day. Thanks so much. Bye.